Welcome back in Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on the Israel-Hamas war, and for that, we bring in Dr. Alon Burstein. As always, Alon, it's good to see you. Let's get straight into it. Israeli tanks pushed deeper into eastern Rafah on Tuesday, reaching some residential districts of the southern Gaza border city where more than 1 million people had been sheltering. Alon, we've been talking about Rafah forever. What specifically has the IDF been working on in the area as of late?
So it's good to see you. So it remains to be seen if this is part of an overall IDF tactic that it is trying to do in Rafah in order to sort of find a way to, on the one hand, invade the city while at the same time not anger the United States too much, or if these really are minimal incursions. What we're seeing since May 6th is that the IDF has been carrying out very, very gradual expansions of its movement into Rafah. We saw them at first go into the most southern, southeastern areas. Then we saw them go along the border, taking over the Rafah crossing. Then they issued evacuation orders to areas more western into the city, areas of El Janaina, Salem. Then there were reports of eyewitnesses on the ground that tanks may be engulfing some of these areas. Now there's reports that there's some operations there. It remains to be seen. Is this how the IDF plans to do it? Does it plan to go in slowly, basically scaring Palestinians to start evacuating, even though they haven't called for a full evacuation of Rafah, in order to sort of solve the problem with the United States, saying, look, these amount of Palestinians have already evacuated so we can move in? Or if these really are more localized things. We know that Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor in the United States, is coming to Israel this weekend in order to discuss this, in order to discuss what exactly is happening. But it remains to be seen. I'll just add that it's important to note that the IDF already carried out this tactic at the beginning of the war in October 26th, 27th, before the IDF had actually launched its full invasion into the Gaza Strip. Everyone was waiting for this 2-week period of what's going to happen. When is the IDF going to launch? Is Hezbollah going to also react? And this is exactly what the IDF did. They said they're just invading the most northern parts of the Gaza Strip. And over the course of about a week, it became apparent, no, this is the actual invasion. It's just being carried out at a much more incremental, slower level than what one would expect.
How is the international community reacting to Israel's effort to move civilians from Rafah so far? Do the efforts seem sufficient given what Israel's most important ally, the United States, has said, or is it too hard to say at this point?
So far, the efforts that Israel has made to evacuate Palestinian civilians, it's not too hard to say, have not satisfied the international community. Israel has said that it is going to set up these humanitarian islands that we talked about, that it is going to set up all of these tent cities in the areas, possibly in northern Han Yunis, possibly in the areas of El Mawasi or Deir el-Balah. They were not set up yet. They're not fully set up. In turn, like I said, the IDF has not actually ordered the evacuation of 1.5 million. There's about 1.4 million Palestinians, most of them internally displaced people, throughout the broader areas of Rafah, including outskirts of the El Mawasi refugee camp in the coast. Theoretically speaking, the IDF is supposed to have this plan set up before it orders that evacuation. It has not done that. What it has done is order the evacuation of these smaller areas. This is causing panic, though. This is causing Palestinian civilians in other areas of Rafah to begin fleeing. They don't want to wait for when the IDF issues an order and all of a sudden 1 million people are trying to evacuate. So according to the UN reports were published today, already 450,000 people estimated from Rafah have already evacuated. So again, this may actually be an IDF tactic saying, instead of going on a head-on collision with the United States, because the IDF has not managed to satisfy what the U.S. wants, instead prolong this small-scale incursion. This is going to lead to a mass evacuation of Palestinians anyway. And then possibly, talking to Jake Sullivan in Israel already on Saturday, Sunday, Israel's in a different position. Maybe there's only, quote-unquote, only 800,000 Palestinians left that you have to negotiate, can you evacuate them or not, instead of the 1.4 million. So that is possible, but certainly what the IDF has done thus far has not satisfied neither the EU, the UN, or the United States.
Let's ask about a New York Times story that came out since the last time we spoke. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has, for years, overseen a secret police force in the Gaza Strip that conducted surveillance on everyday Palestinians and built files on young people, journalists, and people who questioned the government, according to intelligence officials, as well as a trove of internal documents that were reviewed by the New York Times. What did we learn about Hamas from the Times this week, Alon?
Mostly we learned that Yahya Sinwar has not changed over the years. Yahya Sinwar is a very interesting figure. He was one of the people that were part of Hamas in its very early foundations. Hamas itself was established in 1987, 1988, but prior to its establishment, already in the early 1980s, the movement started turning violent. But one of the things that it did, it sees itself as a movement that's meant to destroy Israel and bring about a pure Islamic society. And one of the things it started doing before it started attacking Israel was turn on fellow Palestinians. Hamas had set up units, again, prior to Hamas, it was still the early version of it. In the early 1980s, it set up units that their job was to burn down alcohol stores within the Palestinian territories because alcohol is forbidden according to the strict rules of Islam. Their job was to hunt down people who aren't keeping their marriage vows, hunt down drug dealers, all things that are illegal in Islam. Yahya Sinwar was one of the chief orchestrators of that activity prior to Hamas's establishment. One of the reasons that Sinwar was actually released from Israeli jails in 2011, he was released part of the previous hostage deal in exchange for the soldier Gilad Shalit. However, one of the reasons that Israel agreed to release him is because despite all of his violent activity, all that violence had been turned towards Palestinians in his personal history. He had not carried out himself violent attacks against Israelis. Now, obviously now he is the leader of Hamas and is the orchestrator of October 7th. But the fact that it is extremely important to him to set up a secret police and to be operating within the Palestinian territories as a dictator in order to enforce the strictest rules of Sharia and the strictest rules of Islam is not surprising given his history. He sees himself as a true believer that is not just out to destroy Israel. He's on a religious mission to purify Palestinian society as far as he's concerned. So his violence goes both ways.
Is there any way to know how popular Hamas truly is within Gaza? Is there even a way to measure that sort of thing?
Not in any real way. Like, there are opinion polls that are done within the Palestinian territories and within the Gaza Strip. They have been done even since the war broke out on interpersonal interview basis, because obviously you don't have the telecommunication facility to actually conduct surveys. It's not nearly as reliable. Since October 7th, and in general in the last several years, we have seen sort of ironic thing happening, which is in the areas that Hamas controls in the Gaza Strip, its popularity has declined. It's declined as a result of these things. It's declined as a result of the Israeli siege. It's declined as a result of the mass unemployment. I mean, estimates prior to October 7th said there was roughly 48% unemployment in the Gaza Strip under the Hamas government. So it was declining there. In turn, its popularity was increasing within the West Bank. The Palestinians in the West Bank are subject to a mixture of IDF occupation as well as the authoritarian regime of the Palestinian Authority. There, they long for a change. Now, right now, Hamas is the only alternative to that. So we've actually seen the popularity of Hamas rise in the areas that it does not control out of this dream and vision that maybe they'll bring about a change. In turn, the areas that it does control, we've seen its popularity decline, but specific exact figures are kind of hard to come by.
So let's ask about this Wall Street Journal report here. The Biden administration, and this is a breaking story from today, the Biden administration notified Congress today that it was moving forward with more than $1 billion in new weapons deals for Israel, U.S. and congressional offices have said. So this comes less than a week after the White House, of course, paused a shipment of bombs over a planned Israeli assault on Rafah. But let's make something clear, Alon. This new money has nothing to do with the weapons that Biden is holding, correct?
That's correct. This seems to be almost just a parallel channel. And today, the administration made clear that they are not backtracking on the withholding of those weapons shipments. And they said very explicitly, almost in a way that is more damning in the perception of Israel within the administration than was even seen before. The administration said, yes, they're moving forward with this $1 billion weapons exchange, which includes tank shells and mortars. It includes new armored vehicles. They said at the same time, they are holding back the shipment of bombs that weigh almost a ton, like 900 kilos. And they said explicitly, because we do not believe that they should be used in densely populated territories. And while that may just seem like rhetoric, that's actually a pretty damning statement if the administration is explicitly saying, we don't trust Israel to not use these in densely populated territories, so we're not going to give them. We're not stopping weapons. We're happy to give other weapons as part of our alliance, part of our aid package, but that signals the depth of lack of trust between the administration and the government at this point. I would say even more than just holding the weapons back, explicitly saying, because we don't want them used in a certain way, theoretically you could ask Israel to do that. If you don't trust Israel to do that, that's pretty damning. It's also important to note that on the same day that this story broke, that the administration is moving forward with a $1 billion deal, the Biden administration also said that the president would veto an act of Congress that would compel the administration to not withhold weapons from weapons transferred to Israel. So it's very clear that on the one hand, the administration sees itself as committed to Israel's security, sees itself as committed to honoring the alliance between the countries. At the same time, it's also very clear it is not backing down from holding the sort of lever on the fact that, but if you do certain things that we do not approve of, we're still going to withhold weapons, and the president's going to use a veto power to ensure that he has that capability later on.
One more thing before we go. So Lebanon's foreign minister told the BBC this week that he's worried Israel might intensify its offensive against Hezbollah. The two, being Israel and Hezbollah, have exchanged near daily strikes, as we've been watching, since October 7th. This was not an official from Hezbollah that said this. This was instead a Lebanese official. So my question for you, Alon, what kind of relationship does the Lebanese government have with Hezbollah?
So this was a very interesting statement made by Abdallah Abu Habib, is the Lebanese foreign minister, who is not a fan of Hezbollah himself. Hezbollah is a terror group. It's also a very interesting organization. It has vast military capabilities and terror infrastructure set up in southern Lebanon. It also has a vast network of social services. One of the reasons it's been able to grow so expansively is it has a network of banks, networks of charities, networks of welfare-free food, schools, and it has a political wing. It has been running in Lebanese politics since the early 90s. 1992, it ran in local politics for the first time, and it holds seats in cabinet. It does not hold anywhere near a majority in parliament, but it does have somewhat of a blocking majority in the sense that it can stop the government and basically bring it to a standstill. As a result, the government and Hezbollah have over the years managed to come to what you and I have often called tacit agreements. Have managed to come to these agreements where, on the one hand, Hezbollah does not turn its weaponry on Lebanon. At the same time, the Lebanese government does not try to curtail Hezbollah's activities down south. Hezbollah has created this sort of insular state within a state, and the two live side by side. The Lebanese government is not happy about this. It has very little control over what happens in the southern parts of the country. However, it also does not have the military strength to actually challenge Hezbollah. Hezbollah is very well armed. It is armed also by Syria and by Iran, and the Lebanese government does not have that capability. One of the reasons I would argue that the Lebanese foreign minister stated this today is because things have really been escalating between Hezbollah and the IDF in the last several weeks. Today, Hezbollah launched an anti-tank missile that killed an Israeli civilian in the kibbutz of Adamit and injured 4 IDF soldiers. The IDF in turn carried out a series of attacks, including a targeted assassination in the heart of Tzor, which is a very populated Lebanese city. Things are escalating. Historically, things between Hezbollah and the IDF tend to escalate in the summer. Just historically, that is when war tends to break out. So that's one of the reasons that they are anticipating that things may happen in that direction. Also, as things start to stagnate in Gaza, the IDF may turn its attention to the north, because one of the things Hezbollah has made abundantly clear is it does not matter if the Israeli government and the Lebanese government sign anything. If the situation in Gaza does not de-escalate, Hezbollah is continuing the fight. So de facto, as things in the Gaza Strip continue, if the IDF is less busy there, let's say takes over Rafah by the summer, and is less busy there, it is likely to anticipate that it's going to turn its attention up north to try to resolve that situation.
What's the significance of summer?
It's an easier time to fight, honestly. Different countries go to war at different times based on climate. During the summer, it is easier to fight in the areas of Lebanon because it is a very jungle-filled area. So often, if it's rainy, it's harder for armies on the one hand. On the other hand, Hezbollah has historically used the summer in order to launch rockets and basically terrorize the northern population of Israel, because that is also a very, very touristy area. So in the summer, it is a very populated area. So historically, it's just when things tend to flare up. That's how it happened in 77, how it happened in parts of what the first Lebanon War in 82, and that's how it happened in 2006. So it does not always happen that way. It just tends to happen.
Thank you for the historical insight, and as always, we appreciate your time. We are going to be checking in with you later on in the week. We always look forward to your daily YouTube uploads as well. Take care and have a good night, Alon.